So a pretty typical move that I see as far as a transition is concerned between different locations would be from Montreal to Toronto. Sometimes it's for career and job opportunities. Sometimes it's for family reasons. Sometimes it's just about change. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what families and young professionals actually experience when they make that move, what you'll gain, what you might miss, and what the real costs look like in both cities. Now, I'll preface this video by saying I am not a Montreal expert. I've been there before, but I am not somebody who was born and raised and has made the move. So what I did is I asked around. I've got a fair number of friends and clients, former clients as well, who have made that transition, born and raised in Montreal, now living in Toronto. And so I got lots of opinions, but I'm going to start off with what I know best, which is real estate. Toronto versus Montreal are very different in terms of both pricing and style. So as far as pricing goes, for Toronto, all property types, the average price, this is for September of 2025, is $960,000. That's all your houses, all your condos, everything in between, all kind of mixed in for your average. In Montreal, $579,000. Detached homes, $1.172 million for Toronto, the average, versus $684,000 in Montreal. Townhouses, $719,000 in Toronto versus $616,000 in Montreal. So that gap is kind of getting much, much closer. And what I found interesting was that detached homes aren't, at least on average, terribly more expensive than your average townhouse. And I think that's because you'll find a lot more brownstones, walk-ups, things in Montreal that even though they're a townhouse style property, they actually can be quite lovely and also quite expensive. So that kind of probably raises that average. Townhouses in Toronto, not so much like that, and most of them are condo type townhouses as well. Now for condos, the gap again is fairly close to each other, probably because Toronto has been going through a condo dip over the past, let's call it a couple of years. The average condo price in Toronto is now $563,000. In Montreal, it's $431,000. Average rent, Toronto, just a little under $2,600 a month, and in Montreal, it's just a little under $2,000 a month. So it's a pretty significant difference as well. Now for styles of properties, as far as houses are concerned, they're not really all that different between Montreal and Toronto. I think Montreal is an older city than Toronto, so you will find a higher concentration of some of those more, let's call them like New York style brownstone, kind of like walk up, row houses, townhouses, that kind of stuff. But single family homes, what the major difference is, from what I'm told and from what my kind of research shows me, is that in Toronto, lots are very narrow but long. And in Montreal, they're very wide, but short or shallow. So this will translate to maybe not necessarily a different look on the outside, but a different feel on the inside in terms of the layout. So house layouts in Toronto are going to be more stacked or staggered, I guess, if you will. So walk in the front door, living room, dining room, kitchen, kind of all in a row. Whereas in Montreal, they're going to be kind of width-wise, and I guess maybe in a row, but not in a row from when you walk in the front door, which obviously makes sense. In Toronto, you've got more density. So the properties are closer together. That makes sense because the lots are narrow but longer. So you've got more properties kind of squished together in a smaller space in Toronto than you would in Montreal. The lots are wider for the homes, but there's also more space in between. And that's inherently because the lots are wide, right? So the houses are wide, but the houses don't occupy the entire width of the lot. So you've got more space between houses in Montreal as well. Now for condos, there is, from what I've discovered and what I've been told, there is a higher density of more unique property styles for condos in Montreal. So there's a higher concentration of what we would call hard lofts, or that's what we refer to them in Toronto anyway. These are factories, warehouses, spaces like that have been converted into residential spaces. So they're much more kind of commonplace, much more frequent in Montreal. The other thing with condos is that part of this is just a factor of expense. Toronto is a much more expensive city than Montreal in general, but also your condos in Montreal, even on like the smaller end of the one bedrooms, let's say, they're just larger. So forget about the price, for example. In Toronto, it's really, really easy to find like a 400 square foot, 450 square foot one bedroom. But in Montreal, your one bedrooms kind of start at 600 square feet and go up to 700 square feet. It's not hard to find a 700 square foot one bedroom. No den, nothing like that. In Toronto, in 700 square feet, it's very difficult to find just a one bedroom. You're almost for sure going to find one bedrooms plus den. And in a lot of kind of when I say newer buildings built within the last, let's say 7-8 years, 700 square feet now has 2 bedrooms in it, 2 bed and 2 bath. So that's kind of a big difference. And when you look at this property, and I just kind of pulled a random one up in downtown Montreal, this is a 1-bedroom property. So you can see right here, 1 bed, 1 bath, square feet, 697. So nearly 700 square feet for a 1 bed, 1 bath. When you take a look at the style of this condo, you can see we've got exposed brick, exposed wood beams. This is a hard loft type conversion project. Now, this is obviously one example, but there are a bunch. And so it wasn't hard to find, like I did not have to look hard to find a place like this. I just zoomed in on downtown Montreal, and here's a place like that. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is the price, $419,000. So this is, technically speaking, a below average price-wise condo in Montreal. If you recall what I said earlier, the average is $431,000. So you can get a great hard loft conversion for 400 something thousand in Montreal. Okay, so that handles the real estate aspect of it. What about the city? In other videos in the past, I have mentioned that I think Toronto, for a major city, Toronto's green space is actually quite good. But where it's not very good is downtown. And what my friends and clients who were born and raised in Montreal tell me is that there's lots of green space in downtown Montreal. So that's going to be a big difference, that if you are coming from Montreal to Toronto and you're going to be downtown, you will probably miss some green space. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get in Toronto, but you just have to travel a little bit outside of right downtown in order to get that green space. So you typically have to go a little bit east or a little bit west, or even a little bit up to Midtown, and you can find some, plenty of great parks and trails and that kind of stuff. Now, another thing that I've been told, and certainly something that I can tell just from kind of looking around online and from having, visited there as well, is that Montreal is built around more aesthetics and neighborhoods. It's important that things look good and that they're kind of, presented in a certain way, that they kind of fit with the overall, let's say, charm of the city. Toronto takes more of a practical approach, if at all. Sometimes, planning is done without necessarily a lot of thinking, built around a little bit more efficiency. If you're coming to Toronto, you will gain that efficiency, but you will lose a little bit of that kind of like nice charm and look feel as you kind of look through a lot of parts of Toronto. Now, there certainly are neighborhoods in Toronto that provide a kind of a nice look and a nice vibe, but you have to go searching for them a little bit. Montreal is a little bit kind of the overall feel and vibe would be that like charming, aesthetically pleasing look. So what exactly are you gaining if you're coming to Toronto? Because if you're watching this video, you might be like, okay, it's going to be more expensive. It is not necessarily as pretty, not as, nice to kind of like look around and be a part of, and etc. So what is it that I get? So from what I've been told, there are way more job and career opportunities here in Toronto than in Montreal. And that makes sense. Toronto is the business capital of Canada. It is the finance capital of Canada. If you are in any of those professions, if you are a lawyer, if you are, high up in the finance world or something like that, you're going to have more opportunities, more, chances for growth, either within your field or opportunities in either an adjacent or a completely different field here in Toronto. Another thing that you will gain, which might be good for some, maybe not necessarily good for all, but is a faster pace of life. I actually just got off a call with somebody last week who, is not living in Montreal, but is living in Ottawa. No, not the same city, but they came from a very dense, urban, fast-paced city overseas and moved to Ottawa and just really felt like the big kind of slowdown and are looking to move to Toronto. And they're specifically looking for that kind of fast-paced, little bit more kind of hustle and bustle type lifestyle, because that's more of like what they grew up in, where they came from. Now, the other thing that you're going to gain, and don't get me wrong, Montreal is no slouch. Montreal has, some great stuff, but Toronto just has more of everything. So more museums, more restaurants, more professional sports opportunities. Obviously, the Montreal Canadiens, but Toronto has the Jays going to the World Series, the Leafs, and the Raptors. Now, both Toronto and Montreal have professional soccer teams, or football, sorry. And there's a higher concentration of better schools. Now, that's not to say that there are better schools in Toronto than there are in Montreal. There's just, again, more of them. So you've got more chances to, be in different spots within the city here, and you're more likely to run into like a pretty decent school if you've got a family and you're looking for opportunities for your kids. The obvious difference as far as culture is concerned between Montreal being a, bilingual city, Toronto is an English dominant city, but also multilingual and highly multicultural. It's, one of the most culturally diverse cities in the world. So that might be something that I think it depends on your own background and what it is that you're looking for. If you don't need to kind of grow up in a, in a bilingual city with like, high exposure to French, then, depending again on your background and your kind of family's cultural background and everything like that, you may find more diversity here in the city. Something that came up across multiple places that I was looking, right? My online research, all the different conversations that I was having with people, is Montreal's pride of their joie de vivre. So their work-life balance. Now, that may tie into the job opportunities, the potential for career growth, and the fast-paced way of life. So it has to be something that you are seeking out, because if you want that joie de vivre, if you want that really good work-life balance, you may not necessarily find it in Toronto. So a comment that a few different people made who, people who were born and raised in Montreal and are now living here, is that they feel like, generally speaking, Torontonians are more stressed and they're way more planned. So if you want to, go for dinner with people or something like that, you got to like almost book them like a month in advance, so to speak. And I can sort of relate to that. I've been trying to get together with a few sets of friends for like a games night. And at the end of September, we planned it for November the 21st. And people are like, oh, are you excited? We finally made plans. I'm like, it's 2 months away. It's like too far out for me to like get excited about that yet. Anyway, looking forward to hanging out. But point is that in Toronto, yeah, you really do have to do quite a bit of planning, because a lot of people always have lots of stuff on the go. So it depends on whether you look at that as a positive or a negative, from like a more laid back lifestyle, work-life balance versus, faster pace and more hustle and bustle. So if you're planning a move to Toronto from Montreal and you want help figuring out where to live or what you can afford, how to make that transition smoothly, please feel free to reach out. I help families and professionals do this all the time. And if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you would hit subscribe, if you would check out my other videos on life and real estate in Toronto, and be on the lookout for other upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.